The slaughter wolves of Maldon, the Viking victory that bled England dry. 93 ships rode the grey swell off the English coast in the summer of 991. Aboard them were seasoned Norse raiders, men who had already left Folkestone, Sandwich, and Ipswich damaged or burning behind them. Their commander, identified in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle as Olaf, came searching for silver in the fear that made English rulers surrender it. What the Vikings found beside a tidal river in Essex was not another frightened town. An English army was waiting for them. England under Æthelred the Unready was wealthy, divided, and poorly prepared for fast-moving coastal attacks. Viking fleets had learned how easily longships could enter rivers, place warriors ashore, and withdraw before a larger defense could gather. Following that familiar pattern, Olaf's fleet sailed into the River Blackwater, then known to the English as the Panta. The ships reached Northey Island, a low piece of ground surrounded by mudflats and salt marsh. A narrow causeway connected it to the mainland, but the rising tide covered the crossing twice each day. For the Vikings, the island offered a protected camp. An English army could not attack it directly while the channel was flooded. The same water that protected them, however, also limited their movement. On the mainland stood Byrhtnoth, Ealdorman of Essex. He had gathered the local fyrd, made up largely of regional levies, along with his own experienced household retainers. Byrhtnoth was an older man, described as white-haired and unusually tall. He ordered his warriors to dismount and prepare to fight on foot. The Vikings soon understood that this English lord did not intend to purchase their departure without resistance. A Norse messenger approached the water and called Byrhtnoth's men from the opposite bank. His demand was the sort Viking armies had made before. Send treasure quickly. Give rings and silver in exchange for peace. It would be better, he argued, for the English to pay tribute than to lose men in battle. Once payment had been made, the seamen would return to their ships. Byrhtnoth answered from across the channel. He said the Vikings would receive tribute, but not the kind they expected. They would be paid with spear points and sword edges. English wealth would not be carried away without a fight. For Olaf's men, the answer must have sounded both insulting and unusual. English leaders often paid when confronted by a large fleet. Byrhtnoth had chosen another course. The tide decided what happened next. At high water, neither army could reach the other. The channel was too wide and too deep for an organized crossing. Arrows and insults passed over the water while both sides waited. As the tide withdrew, the narrow causeway began to appear beneath the surface. The Vikings now faced a serious problem. The crossing allowed only a handful of warriors to advance at one time, and the English had placed 3 defenders at its mainland end. The poem names them as Wulfstan, Elfhere, and Maccus. The Norse vanguard tried to force its way over the crossing, but the narrow ground worked against them. Men moving in small groups could not use the full strength of the Viking host. English weapons struck them as they came forward, and the leading warriors fell in the mud and shallow water. The Vikings could not break through. Unable to win the crossing by force, the Norsemen tried persuasion. They called across the water and asked Byrhtnoth to allow them onto the mainland. "Let us cross unhindered," they asked, "and lead our men over the ford to fight on open ground." It was a dangerous request. The Viking army was temporarily trapped on the island, and Byrhtnoth held the strongest position. Olaf's men needed the English commander to give up that advantage willingly. Byrhtnoth agreed. The poet who recorded the battle condemns this decision with the Old English word overmaud, commonly interpreted as excessive pride or overconfidence. According to the poem, Byrhtnoth yielded too much ground to his enemies. His decision may have been driven by more than pride. If the Vikings remained trapped on Northey Island, they could wait for the tide, return to their ships, and attack another settlement. Byrhtnoth may have wanted a decisive battle that would destroy the raiding force, rather than merely send it elsewhere. Whatever his reasoning, he allowed the Norsemen to cross. Byrhtnoth called to them that the route was open, the two armies would meet on firm ground, and God would decide who remained in possession of the field. The Vikings moved quickly. The poem calls them slaughter wolves as they waded westward across the Panta. Some crossed through shallow water, while others moved along the exposed causeway. They carried round shields made from linden wood and formed on the mainland. The battle they had requested was about to begin. Ravens and eagles circled above the marshes, drawn by the noise and movement below. On the ground, the armies closed their formations and built shield walls from overlapping boards. Spears flew from the Norse ranks. English warriors answered with their missiles. Bows sounded from both sides, and iron points struck shields, helmets, and bodies. Then the two lines met. The fighting became close, crowded, and violent. Warriors pushed against shields and searched for openings with spears and swords. Men fell on both sides as the formations pressed together. Byrhtnoth fought near the center of the English line. Although he was an older commander, the poem portrays him as an active participant in the battle, rather than a distant observer. A Norse spear wounded him. Byrhtnoth broke the shaft with his shield, then drove his spear through the attacker's neck. He struck down another warrior soon afterward. The poem says he laughed and thanked God for allowing him to accomplish such work. His success did not last. Another spear thrown from the Viking ranks struck Byrhtnoth. As he weakened, Norse warriors closed around him. One tried to take the rings, armor, and decorated sword from the wounded Ealdorman. Byrhtnoth attempted to draw his blade, but a Viking warrior struck his sword arm. The weapon fell from his hand, its golden hilt dropping onto the ground. The Norse fighters killed Byrhtnoth. Two men who remained beside him, Ælfnoth and Wulfmare, also fell while defending their lord. The death of the Ealdorman changed the battle. An English warrior named Godric fled on Byrhtnoth's horse. His brothers followed him. When other Englishmen saw the familiar horse leaving the field, some believed that Byrhtnoth himself had retreated. The misunderstanding spread through the formation. Parts of the English line began to break, and the Vikings pushed into the opening. Not everyone ran. Byrhtnoth's household retainers remained near his body. These were men bound to their lord by service, loyalty, and reputation. To abandon him after his death would have brought lasting shame. They chose to continue fighting. One of the retainers, an elderly warrior named Byrhtwold, raised his shield and shook his ashwood spear. He then spoke the lines for which the Battle of Maldon is best remembered. Mind must be the harder, heart the keener, spirit the greater, as our strength grows less. Byrhtwold looked toward the body of his fallen lord and declared that anyone who thought of leaving would regret it forever. The surviving retainers attacked again. Some fought to avenge Byrhtnoth, others simply refused to outlive the defeat. One after another, they were killed around the Ealdorman's body. By the end of the fighting, the Vikings controlled the field. Their victory was costly. The Vita Sancti Oswaldi, written at Ramsey Abbey within about a decade of the battle, claims the Danes suffered so many wounds that they could barely crew their ships. Even with those losses, Olaf's army had achieved its purpose. The English force had been defeated, Byrhtnoth was dead, and Æthelred's government now faced the possibility of further attacks. Acting on the advice of Sigeric, Archbishop of Canterbury, Æthelred paid the invaders 10,000 Roman pounds of silver. This payment is often treated as the first major Danegeld of Æthelred's reign. The payment did not end Viking pressure on England. It showed future raiders that large sums could be obtained through organized violence and the threat of continued destruction. More fleets arrived in the years that followed. The demands grew larger. In 1007, the English paid 36,000 pounds of silver, approximately 16,329 kilograms, in exchange for 2 years of peace. In 1012, after the sack of Canterbury, Another payment of £48,000 was made. Eventually, Viking leaders stopped settling for tribute. Sweyn Forkbeard invaded England and took the throne. His son, Cnut, later became king and ruled an empire that included England, Denmark, and Norway. The Battle of Maldon did not make that conquest inevitable. It did, however, expose the weakness of England's defenses and the political willingness of its rulers to purchase temporary peace. Beside a tidal causeway in Essex, Olaf's slaughter wolves had shown what a determined Viking army could extract from a divided kingdom. The field at Maldon belonged to the English dead, but the silver that followed belonged to the Norse.